I don't know why it feels weird to be filming this in a pajama shirt, but whatever. So I am trying to work through the stuff that is on HBO Max that I have been meaning to see so that I can cancel my subscription. So, in that spirit, I've now seen Heretic. This was a movie that came out last year. It is a religiously themed horror movie. It stars Hugh Grant as, well, as the villain of the piece. And what it is about is a couple of young women who are Mormon missionaries show up at this man's house, and things go really, really badly from there. So I am going to be getting into more specifics later if you haven't seen it yet, but I'll try to give you a heads up before I start to go there. I would say structurally, this bears a pretty strong resemblance to Barbarian, not in the strictest sense of like the way that it's built, but in terms of like the first act is by far the best because it is the most tense and visceral, not in a gore way, but visceral in a psychological discomfort way. And actually, sort of doing a similar thing in that Barbarian, kept you in the head of this woman who was really uncertain if this guy was or wasn't a threat to her. And Heretic isn't really trying to hide the fact that Hugh Grant is a threat, but like watching the little signs or the things that he will do to make them doubt that he's a threat just long enough that they'll stick around longer. It built a similar kind of anxiety, and also it is the best part of the movie. Now, here, as was the case with Barbarian, that doesn't mean it falls off a cliff after the first act. The back end is still good. It's just not as good. So I always want to be careful because I think sometimes when people say like, "Oh, the first act's the best part," sometimes they mean, or even if they don't mean this, sometimes people interpret it as like that's the only good part. It's not. It is the strongest part of the movie, though. Like I can say that with full confidence. But where it goes from there, I do think still works, and it did still unsettle me, although in a little bit more of a haunted house kind of way. Not literally a haunted house. Again, we're not into spoilers yet, but the energy that it was using to unsettle me shifted because it starts with just this sense of just this guy. It's a very intangible kind of psychological like I know that you are a danger. I'm just not entirely sure in what way or why. And later on, it's a lot clearer answers to that, but there is still that palpable sense of danger. It's just a little bit more tangible then. So all the performances in this are great. I think Hugh Grant has gotten an awful lot of focus for his performance, and like not undeservingly, he's very, very good. His career has actually been so much more interesting ever since he aged out of being able to be a romantic lead. He's made such interesting choices in terms of his films, and I really, really like his performance here because he can bring just enough of that charm that it makes sense that these young women don't immediately run away. That having been said, the performance of those two is also really good because they do cordon on not too far into it that like this is not a safe situation, but he's already kind of blocked off their exits to be able to leave. So it's not like they act foolishly and ignore a million signs. They have like some reservations even stepping into the house initially. Like there's the rules of their Mormon missionary, which is they can't go into a house that just has a man. But he's like, oh well, my wife is baking a pie. You can smell it from the kitchen. And so they get lulled in just enough to get inside and have the door locked behind them. And from there, you can tell that at least one of them is kind of like, okay, something isn't quite right, and is like looking for the signs, but she thinks she'll be able to just get up and leave. And he will always assure them that they can, but that's not what he's doing here. So this is This has a lot of focus on Hugh Grant's character's sort of laser focus on his views of religions, not just Mormonism, but a lot of religions. I've seen this described, I'll call this one a soft spoiler, just because it's an accurate descriptor, but it like gives you a little bit of a sense of where things are going, a little bit more than anything I've said so far. I've seen this described as Saw if the Jigsaw killer was an asshole atheist. That's not an inaccurate reading on that. What's interesting to me is I've seen people posit that as a negative. Like I've seen in some reviews, because like I looked through like Letterboxd reviews and a few others that like people were turned off, I feel like, because they expected Hugh Grant's character to make stronger cases against the religious views of people like Mormon missionaries and in general. The thing is, I think that's a feature, not a bug. There's a reason that he is trying to confront and grill two very young women. He's not grilling scholars. He's not grilling experts in religious texts. He's grilling young practitioners who are not prepared. It's a bit like when those right-wing jackasses like Ben Shapiro show up on college campuses and like dunk on students. Like, is that the only kind of people you can debate? You feel like actually sitting down and talking to an expert who has media training as opposed to random college students just to make you look good? Like, he has that energy, and I think that's deliberate. I think that's on purpose, and I like that. A reminder for like my own position on like not necessarily religion in general, but in terms of religion being depicted in a lot of media. While I certainly am not one to take in religious propaganda films, I do get incredibly frustrated with how often, especially in the kind of media that I take in, because it happens a lot, especially in sci-fi, which this isn't, but it does happen a lot in a lot of the media that I watch, that religious people are depicted as, treated as, and discussed as just lesser. They are fools, they were tricked, they were conned into this thing in a moment of weakness, and it's a flaw to have faith. And I viscerally reject that. Like, I view religious faith the same way that I would view most sets of principles. There are ways to hold those thoughts and those beliefs and still be a good person. Just as there are ways to hold absolutely none of those beliefs and be a complete piece of garbage. Your religious beliefs do not make you a fool. And the fact that like, whoa, you can't prove that for certain, like that somebody still believing doesn't make them a foolish person. Like, that's what faith is, the fact that you can't prove it. And I feel like in a lot of media, or at least again, a lot of the media that I personally take in, just kind of very harshly turns up its nose on faith in a way that Hugh Grant's character seems to be doing when you start watching this. But I really like that they give, some real strength of character to these two young women, including like drawing strength from the beliefs they have, not necessarily validating those beliefs, but showing how those beliefs inform them both in a negative and a positive way. Because trust me, this does not whitewash the Mormon Church. This movie has gotten a fair bit of praise from ex-Mormons, very specifically in terms of how it depicts what it's like to be a missionary for them. The restrictions on, how you're able to behave, how you dress, where you go, what you do, and how restricted things like your media diet or even your literal diet tends to be. And it's gotten a lot of praise for its accuracy on that specific aspect. Obviously, the horror aspect is a whole other thing. And it does feel like it is approaching all this with a degree of respect for people holding on to their faith without necessarily validating the specifics of their faith, which is a balancing act that I always love to see when I can find it. I am now going to get a bit more into spoilers outright. So if you are intrigued and you haven't already seen it and want to see some really great performances and some real good tension, just understanding that the first act is the best part, go check it out. We're going to talk spoilers from here on out. So the extent that Hugh Grant's character goes to mess with them and the things that he's doing. There's one specific exchange that is kind of chilling and really kind of epitomizes the entitlement of a person like him. Because towards the tail end where, spoilers, I did warn you, one of the girls has been killed and the remaining one, is asking him, why are you doing this? And he responds with, why are you letting me? That is a position of entitlement and privilege and superiority that anyone would ever think to respond like that, except that it's a response I could see a lot of people that I have encountered or witnessed giving. So I really do feel like it's really well balanced. And in terms of which character lives and which character dies, they actually caught me off guard with that. Which is funny because there's only two I figured somebody was gonna die. There's a line earlier on in the first act, where one of them says, after I die, I want to come back as a butterfly and I'm going to land on my friend's hands so they know it's me. And I'm like, okay, so somebody's definitely going to die and there's going to be a thing with a butterfly at the end. Yeah, big shock. That is what happens. But despite the fact that it was a 50-50 split between which of these two characters was going to die, they still caught me off guard with which one it was. Because it was the one who'd been standing up to him more. It was the one who had been figuring more stuff out. It was the one who had been more aware of the danger. And whereas in so many horror movies, that would immediately single her out as the special one, as the final girl, as the one who knows that there is danger and is prepping for it. And she is doing all that, but that doesn't mean she gets to live. That doesn't automatically grant you the power of survival. And that we are left with the one who has been a little bit shakier, who hasn't been pushing back on this guy's ideas, but who then starts to do that. I feel like that is actually really fulfilling and a lot more interesting than what I expected, which was for just the one who was more scared to die so that the strong one could prove just how strong she was. No, the strong, in air quotes, narratively, sort of thematically, character arcs and all that, the strong one is the one who dies, and the one who is left has to find a strength she didn't know she had. And the fact that they caught me off guard with that really shocked me because it really did feel just such a traditional, okay, it's really clear. It's just really clear where this is going. And then they killed the one I wasn't expecting. And in a moment that I wasn't expecting either of them to die right then. That got me. That got me pretty good. If you are expecting a believable thing, don't. As it gets into its second and third act, it gets preposterous in terms of what this man has in his house. Are you kidding me? But I think by then, if you have bought into it, it won't matter. And for me, it didn't. Now, I don't want to oversell this. Again, a bit like Barbarian, it gets more ridiculous as it goes, but I think it keeps its eye on its points and its themes. And I like that they, present this guy who is very, his entire thing is being oh, well, I've studied all these things and I have the real truth. And he's just a belittling dickhead. And when either one of these women starts to stand up against him, you can see that that's all he is. I really did like this movie. I ended up sleeping on it, to sort of, because it's one of those things where I'm I know what parts I definitely liked, and there were other aspects of it. I'm let me think on it. I slept on it, and I'm recording this the next day, and then I'm coming back. I'm no, actually, I like how all that fits together. I think this is well done for what it is, and it is ultimately kind of ridiculous schlock, but it's ridiculous schlock that does have points to make. Not the deepest points in the world. Like, don't make the mistake of like Hugh Grant's character and like thinking there's more thought put into this than there is. Like, no, but there is some. And I thought this pulled it off really well. Heretic. Have you seen it? What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills. Enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. Those all help. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break. And now to shout out my highest supporting patrons. Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Zubin Lutfula, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Oliver B, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Becky Sparks, Ulrich, Loki Eris, Tracy Scrabbit, Palbo, Rabajoggle, Sir Didymus is my favorite, and starting this month, I'm going to shout out 3 random supporters from the other tiers. So this month, my thanks to Tommy Castronova, Tim Price, and Caramelized Catherine. If you want to hear me shout you out, check out the reward tiers on the Patreon. You know, I put them one on each shoulder, they consolidated immediately. So, thanks, guys.